Welcome back to the Left of Old North. We're hosts with the most. My name is Adrian.
And I'm CJ.
And today, we're going to have to move through this episode pretty quickly, because I feel like we say this every episode, but there's a lot to cover. And I mean, it's only been a week. We're going to try and get this out the very next morning. So, hang on to your hats. We're going to be moving through this pretty quick. CJ, how's your week been?
It's been good. Busy, but got had Easter and all that good stuff. But that's done, and now we're
Happy Easter.
Here at the start of a new week.
Happy late Easter to everybody who celebrated, and happy 250th anniversary of Lexington and Concord. Happy 420 to all of you who indulge, and we'll just move right along from there. So, big thing happened this weekend. Which I will cover a little bit more later, but the 50-51 protest that happened on the 19th here in Raleigh, and also saw a lot of American flags out there, but a lot of the American flags were upside down, which I think is interesting, because if you don't know, an American flag that's flown upside down means that the country is in a time of distress. Now, both sides have kind of used this to mean different things at different times. During Biden's presidency, there were a lot of MAGA supporters that love to fly upside down flags, and variations of flags that were many different colors, some all black, which is also a way to say take no prisoners. So if you didn't know. But CJ, I wanted to get your kind of insight, because you brought this up to me while we were discussing what we wanted to talk about, and I think it's interesting, the premise that you're putting forward here.
Yeah, so I can't even remember how I started to think about this, where this came from, but I started kind of thinking about the idea of one thing that I think Democrats might want to do, or probably should do, on a national level, state level, whatever, kind of reclaim this idea of patriotism.
Now, does this mean you want us to start wearing the American flag as like our booty shorts, or like
not quite. I'm not saying go full on Toby Keith, courtesy of the red, white, and blue over here.
Because I mean, I do have a pair, and I'm just looking for any excuse to bust those suckers out.
That will be for the top tier part of our Patreon. Is a full 12-month calendar spread of Adrian Brakely in his red, white, and blue booty shorts.
Nice. All right, cool. I will bust out the camera here pretty shortly. 4th of July special coming up, folks.
Discount code 1776. Anyway, all that to say, no, I think that for a very long time, the right, especially after 9/11, kind of took over the American flag, kind of took over what it means, and kind of defined what it means to be patriotic, to love your country and all that stuff. And this may not be for every single Republican out there. A lot of this idea of what it means to be patriotic is being almost nationalistic, being against anything that is different, anything that's not baseball and apple pie.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not questioning the president, although it's not questioning the president as long as that president is a Republican. But the thing is, the way I look at it, one of the most patriotic things you can do is question the president, is question the government, and push back and criticize. It doesn't mean you don't love your country. It just means you want to see it get better. That's
sure.
kind of an aside there.
And I tend to agree in the way that patriotism should not belong to one party. The wires get a little crossed there when we start putting a nationalistic vibe on it, right? Because then it's like, well, okay, maybe both parties don't need to be super nationalists. We don't need to all be wearing flag pins and make sure to fly the flag off the back of our Ford F-150s all across our 7-lane highways. We don't all need to be doing that. But I think that you raise a good point of there are clearly a bunch of Democrats who would do that no matter what. They might be embarrassed to, because they don't want to be associated necessarily as somebody who leans conservative. But I would argue they kind of already do, and maybe they just need to embrace that and kind of just like take it back in a way.
Yeah.
Like, hey man, people on the left already think that moderate Democrats are more to the right than some Republicans. So like, just own it, maybe.
Yeah. And, Republicans love to kind of paint Democrats in this light of they are anti-American, they're anti-America, right? And I think one way we can fight that is, again, embrace the iconography, embrace the flag, embrace, the bald eagle and all that stuff. But we don't have to take it to that nationalistic level. Nothing says we have to, and we shouldn't take it to that level.
It's a very fine line.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a fine line between nationalistic and jingoistic and patriotic. Yeah, and I will say, I think that the Republican Party, again, especially post 9/11.
I mean, the Democrats too, post 9/11.
Well, true. But I will say Republicans have definitely done a incredible job in the worst way of weaponizing patriotism.
Sometimes literally.
Yeah, sure.
Let's paint American flags on the side of our bombs. There, it's patriot. It's not a weapon of mass destruction. It's a weapon of mass patriotism. We're bringing democracy to the desert, and like I think that you have a good. I think you have a good premise. I think it's interesting that like, why not let the left also use the symbol of American iconography and this sort of patriotic bent? Why can't we do that? And I think that part of the problem is that so much of what is jingoistic, what is conservative, is already kind of wrapped up in the flag. It's really hard to separate that, especially when you have a large subsection of the left wing of our society, not just the party, but like in our society, that views the American flag as something that is just inherently colonial. It is inherently abusive to like native people. That's kind of hard for us to reclaim in a way.
Yeah.
Not shooting it down. Not shooting the idea down at all, but that is the struggle. That is ultimately the thing that is going to be a defining feature in the conversation that I don't think a lot of people will be able to get over, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I get it. And I think, again, one of the things I said earlier was, I think one of the most patriotic things you can do is criticize your country. Mm-hmm. But one of the most patriotic things you can do is also be honest about your country. Be honest about its history. And be honest about its mistakes. It's, I would say it's original sin, but really original sins, plural, mass genocide of Native Americans, slavery, etc.
Yeah.
But we can also try and remember that, we have done great things, but we have also done horrible things.
Right.
We need to acknowledge those horrible things and learn from it. We learn from it, we correct those mistakes. Mm-hmm. And we as a country, we as a society can grow from it.
I think that that's probably the right way to look at it. But that's also clearly from our perspective. And
we're two white dudes. We definitely don't necessarily have our finger on the pulse there.
Well, I already said I kind of already gave the game away. I do have some things that have an American flag emblazoned on them that I wear on an infrequent basis, but that I still wear. So, like, it's not beyond what I already consider to be, something that I would already do. But you mentioned also some recent Democratic campaigns that prominently featured the flag. We kind of covered this a little bit, very, very briefly, but like Democrats post 9/11 went hard on using the flag as part of their imagery. And the thing is that Bush was just better at it. I think a lot of Republican conservatives were. So that's something that's going to be hard to overcome, because Obama didn't get away from it completely, but he did sort of move the iconography from something that was more nationalistic oriented to something that was more identity oriented. It was more, the campaign was not necessarily, and this isn't to knock him at all, but the campaign was more about his identity and the hope that he represented and the change that he could represent as somebody who could become president versus somebody running with a national identity. Like, for instance, I have a Biden poster back here, or a Biden sign back here. They very explicitly used the imagery of the flag in the E in his name. And he's definitely not the first one to do it.
Not at all.
But definitely the most prominent recently, I would say. Do you have any examples that you can think of? Putting you on the spot here, but...
Oh, God.
Because, I mean, he's looking back on his wall trying to figure out... It's not beyond the realm of possibility for Democrats to use this kind of imagery, but I just don't think that in the post 9/11 era, in the post Obama era even, and especially after Trump, we are kind of past the point on the left where we want to use that kind of iconography because it sort of labels you as someone who is in that way.
I will say, if we do kind of go that route, if we do try to reclaim it, so say we should, embrace efforts by progressive groups to kind of make it a little bit more inclusive and justice oriented.
Yeah, and there's
probably go back to that idea, like the original sin and inequity and inequality in the country. So yeah, no, we can definitely work on following the lead of those Democratic campaigns, or those progressive groups, I should say, to kind of reclaim, redefine patriotism as something that is inclusive and is justice oriented. And I think that, well, obviously it does not solve every single problem out there, and it does not necessarily address adequately, those issues of the original sins, as I put it earlier.
Yeah.
It's still a step that we can take.
I don't know if we have the PR money for that, to be honest. But yeah. Speaking of PR money, and something that the DNC is kind of dealing with right now, kind of want to pivot real hard into something that happened this week that was kind of a big story. If you haven't heard about it already, 25-year-old David Hogg, who just recently won a position as a vice chair in the Democratic Party, he put forward a plan, or rather, just not really a plan, just an initiative to fund primary challenges against incumbent Democrats that he and people in his organization called Leaders We Deserve feel are not doing enough to resist the Trump administration, and by extension Republicans in general. And then that has kind of resulted in some tensions, to put it mildly. So just some quick facts on this. So they want to fund a $20 million campaign through the Leaders We Deserve. I don't know if it's a PAC or if it's just a group. I think it might be a PAC. I think they have a PAC associated with it. Regardless, they want to spend $20 million through that organization to support young progressive candidates to challenge these older incumbents. And just today, when we're recording, this is the 20th, criticism from party leaders like Hakeem Jeffries, who emphasize unity and caution, he's basically said, I don't care what David wants to do, I'm going to stick by our incumbents. And David Hogg has kind of put forward this defense as like it's essential for revitalizing the Democratic Party, because right now we have certain leaders that are not really beholden to the wider demographic of young voters and Democrats in general. But I see the argument on both sides a little bit that technically they are representing their constituency. If they're not going to get voted out, that's kind of what primaries are for. On the flip side of that, I do think it's very healthy for democracy in general, but especially for political parties to have regular contested primaries. Now, I know that there are some who would disagree with me, especially because primaries cost a lot of money, and there's a lot of time investment involved. So not taking that out of the equation, it's something that's cropped up over the last week, and it's been part of it's one small part of a larger conversation that's kind of been boiling and boiling and boiling, and I think this might be the tipping point.
Yeah, no, and I mean, like you said, having these challenges are part of a healthy democracy, and it's what will help keep the Democratic Party itself also healthy. But I mean, I think David Hogg also went on at some point in the past week to say something along the lines of, you're not just going to challenge people who are old or people who are whatever. Mm-hmm. You're going to challenge people who are essentially feckless, the ones who aren't showing a spine or anything like that, which is much needed. I mean, the Democratic Party has an approval rating of, what, 27%? That sounds about right.
And I wouldn't be surprised if it's lower now.
Yeah, same. Obviously, that's a huge problem.
Yeah.
You have, we have had members of the Democratic Party literally die in office. What was her in California? Dianne Feinstein?
Yeah.
Yeah. She literally died while she was still in office. And she was
in her 90s.
God, how old was she when she died? 90? Yeah. She had been there, I think, since at least the 80s, if I remember right.
Something like that. Regardless, It was longer than most of us, or most of our age group, have been alive.
Yeah, exactly. And one of my things is, you get into office, this is your first term, you are still connected in a way to your district. You're still connected to the zeitgeist that you kind of managed to tap into.
Mm-hmm.
You're there for a term. You've been in DC for a while. You've kind of started learning how to play the game. And maybe you haven't been to your district as much. Right? But you still go on the breaks and whatnot that Congress have specifically for that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get reelected, and it's the third term, and oh my God, where am I even from? I don't remember now.
Yeah.
This is an issue in my district apparently. Well, my constituents didn't call my office, so I have no idea. You start to kind of lose that connection. That pulse on the zeitgeist of your district.
You become out of touch.
And yeah, exactly. You become out of touch, and you just kind of get used to it. You kind of take it for granted, and you don't put into you don't put in the effort. You get so used to what you're doing that you get complacent. Once you start to get complacent, you start to not care.
Right.
At least not actively care. You don't really, or you no longer consider. Let me back up.
Well, you no longer consider that to be an important part of your job. To get to know your constituency on a regular basis. You're just kind of there to do the wheeling and dealing in Washington, D.C. And I think a lot of these Washington insiders start to feel that the things that are going on in D.C. are a lot more important than what's going on in their district. Not because they don't care. I think at some level they do. I don't want to come out and just be like, they don't care about anything that happens in their district. I don't want to put that blanket statement on everybody because that's not fair. We're people. We're flawed. But I'm not going to give them. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. Like, yes, there are people in Congress right now that are completely oblivious to the kinds of things that are affecting everyday Americans, and they continue to call for. They continue to call for pushes in Congress and from the president. I mean, Democratic senators and congressmen as well will try to, they're trying to like influence Trump as if they're going to get anywhere with him, especially publicly. And it just speaks to like, this goes back to a few weeks ago now with Chuck Schumer, just feeling that this old way of getting things done in Washington is still the way to do it. We are past that, man. Catch up. The train is leaving. You are on the last car. You better jump on or we're moving beyond you. Because we have to. We have to keep the train moving. If you're not on, that's not our fault. And like people were calling for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to run against him. Mm-hmm. I would say that at this point, not a bad pitch.
No, it's not. And I mean, it's because Schumer is out of touch. Pelosi is out of touch. Most of the Democratic leadership is out of touch, and what's the quote? It's the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. We have done the same thing as a party for so damn long, and look where we are at. The Republicans have control of all three major branches of government, and even though there's a system of checks and balances, those fucking systems are breaking down right now.
Right.
And
even when they don't, even when like there's a sliver of hope and there's a unanimous decision by the Supreme Court in what just happened earlier this week, if you've been paying attention, they basically told the Trump administration, no, you cannot send this dude to El Salvador without due process. Even when this court that has a 6-3 conservative majority decides that the Trump administration is wrong, they're still not doing it. The Trump administration is just ignoring him, just ignoring the court. And it's like, well, okay, so checks and balances. Hey, Congress, maybe do your job. Nope, because they've got a very slim majority in both the House and the Senate, so nothing's gonna happen.
Yeah.
So
Republicans
throw
are
the
also
checks and balances thing out the window. We have got to stop leaning on that, Chuck, and by a somewhat lesser extension, Hakeem Jeffries.
Yeah.
Do whatever it takes at this point. That's what we as American citizens, that's what we as Democrats, that's what we as liberals and anybody to the left of us is saying. Please, dear God, pull whatever levers you have.
And I think it's interesting, a lot of this pushback that you were seeing against David Hogg's idea, not all of it comes from the leaders, but a lot of, I would rather say sizable majority of it does. It's coming from Schumer and Pelosi and Jeffries and whatnot. And I think it's most definitely in part, at least, because they're afraid of losing their own power. Republicans love power. Democrats also love power.
Yes.
Yes. And whenever you have been there for so damn long, you don't want to give it up.
And you don't want to lose re-election.
Exactly. And my thing is...
Because you can be in power and still lose an election or not be in office. Like, you can go be a lobbyist. Yeah. You can go work on the board or be on the board of a multi-billion-dollar company. There are ways, but it's a multifaceted.
It is. And kind of going back to your little train thing, like... I think my analogy I like is, we are still or have been acting forever like, Republicans are playing the same game we are, but they're not. It's not even that they're, playing by a different set of rules. They've created a whole new fucking game.
Yeah.
We're still over here like, oh, let's, play baseball and, hit it and, run the bases and whatnot. They're figuring other shit out. They're doing something that we don't even know what it is.
That's funny. I was also thinking of baseball. I'm sure that anybody who's listening to this, that I would bet that there's a high percentage of you. We didn't even mention the game, but then he said baseball, and I was like, wow, okay. Is it because it just has a ridiculous set of rules? And well, there you go. We're bringing it back. Do you think it's just because it has an absurd amount of rules and not all of them are used all the time and barely anybody knows what's going on at any given time? And for some reason, it's just all boring as shit, but we keep doing it.
I mean, partly. But,
baseball people out there are going to hate me for that one. But
I mean, that's the thing. Like, Schumer and Pelosi, they don't know what's going on anymore.
No.
They really don't. They just care about their insider trading, Pelosi.
Well, allegedly. Possibly.
Well, very loosely, allegedly.
Look, Representative Mike Levin out of California, 49th District, he's made his whole congressional career off of trying to get congressional stock trading banned completely. And let me tell you, he is getting his work cut out for him this week. During this presidency, like when you have high level economists straight up saying like, I would be shocked if there isn't anybody in the upper echelons of our federal government that is not making a pretty penny off of the fact that these stocks suddenly jumped and then dove overnight.
Yeah. I like David Hogg's idea. I think that we should be challenging the people who are feckless, who don't have a spine, who aren't willing to do what, like, say, Senator Van Hollen did.
Yeah.
And, go down to El Salvador. We should be challenging people who won't use their platform and use their voice that the people have voted to give them.
Mm-hmm.
We should challenge them. We should call them out. And we should make them afraid. We should make them realize that, oh, shit, I can lose this position. I don't, change what I'm doing and actually do my fucking job.
Which is to, listen to the people who voted you in. Even if you want to sit here and claim that we are all paid by Soros. Still waiting on that check, George. But
yeah, same. He can Venmo me if anything.
Yeah. We're going to have to get in touch with his son, I guess, now. He apparently he does more of the business side of things now. But that kind of brings me into it, like, I'm going to take a bit of an opposite position here from David Hogg, not because I appreciate the urgency and I appreciate the action and the willingness to just be like, no, this is what we're going to do. Suck it up if you don't like it, because we're going to do it. The one thing that we need to really make sure that we're watching for is that we're not unintentionally replacing people who do represent their district really well, because then we run the risk of a more moderate Republican running in the general election and then winning over moderates. That's not the fearmonger about like the Overton window and that's why you should never run progressives, but like this is why it's a district by district race. House races are not national races. Sometimes they can be, especially when it's a really high profile one, but for the most part it's a statewide at most race. Senate races are where it gets really like more at the national level, and that's where you get a lot of big money coming in from outside states and things like that. Here in North Carolina, we have 4 Democrats and 10 Republicans in our House delegation to Congress. It used to be 7 and 7, a lot more even, right? Now, some people would argue, those maps were also gerrymandered more in favor of the Democrats, especially when you look at that one that stretches all the way from like Winston-Salem down to Charlotte. If you take a look at a map from the 2010s, you know what I'm talking about. But so fair, understood, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily fair, right? We've got like anywhere between 10% at the most down to like negative, like a 0.01% difference in voting here in the state when it comes to the split of votes between people. It's a very purple-ish state. Yeah. We should not have a 4-10, and that's tentative. Like Don Davis won that race by a hair.
Yeah.
That's that's NC's first district for all of y'all that are listening, and just so you know that first district includes 22 counties in the northeast of North Carolina. So just imagine that campaign for a second. The point being that sometimes you cannot run somebody in that district that is way less socially conservative than somebody like Don Davis. Part of the reason he won in that district is because he's able to relate to the people that live out there, and he represents them a little bit better, even if he doesn't hold the same types of values. 80% of the time, 85% of the time, probably even 90% of the time, he's going to vote with Democrats. But on bills where it's a little more like socially conservative, a little bit more on the gun rights advocacy type thing, he might vote the other way. And the question, the question we really have to ask ourselves is: do we want to win elections, or do we want to have accurate representation? Yeah, I would argue we just need more fair maps.
I think that is a fair critique. I do. I think there is room for kind of both of these ideas a little bit. I think we do need to be careful of those places where, if someone gets out, then a more moderate then a moderate Republican can just kind of slide in and we lose that. But we should still, at the same time, go after people who literally do nothing for the party, who are not helping to advance it, who are not helping to stand up and, again, use that platform, use their position to speak up against the bullshit going on with the Trump administration. I think there's room for kind of both of these things. It's just going to take a little bit of fine-tuning, to say the least.
Yeah, and it's also going to take, using the current situation that we're in with the Trump administration, with the way that the tariffs situation has gone, with the human rights abuses that, somehow they're like just speed running that right now. And when you consider that that's something that you can use as part of an electoral campaign, as part of the rhetoric, then, definitely we should be hinging on that every single time. We should be just hitting him over the head with it. And a lot of people are saying, isn't it great that some Republicans and some conservatives are starting to regret their vote? Or not even just Republicans or conservatives, but moderates and like unaffiliated voters. They're starting to regret their vote a little bit because they didn't fully understand, or they didn't think he was actually going to do some of the stuff that, he said that he was going to do. But I urge people to really be cautious about that, because the thing with that is that if they were willing to vote for Trump, that doesn't mean they're not willing in the future to vote for somebody who is a Republican, but is just slightly less bad than Trump. This is going to take a lot more of a push to make sure that people understand that this is not just Trump. This is
the platform of the conservative right wing of America right now, that they are okay with this. All of them. It's not just Trump. It's the administration. It's all the people in Congress that are enabling him. It's the courts. It is the people that work in the party structure, especially here in the NCGOP. They are co-signing pretty much everything he wants to do. And we don't have as much leverage as the U.S. Congress does here in our state legislature to be able to fight that.
We don't.
So that's the fight we have ahead. And, you know, our races get contentious here, not the least of which is the one that has been going on for 6 months now.
Oh, dear Lord.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're bringing up the Riggs v. Griffin case again, folks. Ding, 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 ding. Round 5. Let's go.
Oh, God. Nah. Again, before we really get into this, I want to emphasize to everyone listening to this how absolutely fucking absurd this is that we are still talking about this in April for a race that was in November of last year. This is insanity. And it is just a showing of the GOP's willingness to throw votes away, steal elections, and strip you of your voice.
Mm-hmm.
And it is absolutely, again, it's just insanity. And, you know, one of the voices that they are trying to strip are certain military people. You know, the people who sign up, and Adrian, you can probably speak to this obviously a little bit better than I can. But, you know, they're trying to strip away the votes of people who have signed up to serve their country and this state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's over 1,600 ballots. Over 1,600 ballots of the 68,000 that Jefferson Griffin's team was challenging belonged to military members, which means that they went through the effort of making sure all of their ducks were in a row, making sure that they did their civic duty from overseas, wherever they were serving, and that those got to where they needed to go on time. And the North Carolina Supreme Court, which again is a conservative majority right now, is just kind of deciding to toss those. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, they haven't done it yet, but it is on the table.
Correct. Last I heard. They haven't actually thrown anything out yet.
But the fact that it's on the table in the first the fact that it's on the table in the first place is it's abhorrent. Like, service members don't have a choice to be able to come over from, you know, wherever they're stationed to just vote locally in North Carolina, in any state. So to just say, oh, we should just throw these out because it's like too much effort, it's too much trouble. The fact that they're even considering that it really is a gateway to having just kind of like what we were talking about before, that if they set a precedent for this, you're opening the floodgates for them to throw out military ballots in any race that they want to contest, simply because it's too much trouble, or it's that they can't get it done within a certain time frame. And that's part of the problem, right? Is that military ballots have to be done very, very by the book, very efficiently, and they have to be in the mail by a certain point in time. Like, I was an FFAP representative while I was in the service. I helped people get registered and actually vote in November of 2018. I know the drill. It's not easy.
And I mean, I think one of the things that pisses me off is, you know, and this is no secret, you know, our country treats its veterans like absolute shit. We don't fund the VA like it should be. We don't, you know, provide the post-service care that we should.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just one more fucking thing. You know, oh, you served your country, you know, risked your life, or you put your body on the line, you got injured, whatever. Maybe you've lost a limb, maybe something has happened to you. Well, you know, thank you for your service. Fuck you. We're going to strip away your right to vote, essentially.
And like, the fact that we have the ability to vote is in and of itself a huge privilege, because they didn't always have that, right? This wasn't always, like, I believe the first time that veterans were able to vote, and I may need to go back and edit this. If I'm wrong, you will hear my voice right now saying past Adrian was wrong. But I believe the first time that that military service members were able to vote was when Lincoln was elected during his second term. Now, Or for his second term.
Okay, so I wasn't wrong, but the concept of absentee voting was in its infancy in 1862. It was the first time that they argued for it. There were a couple of states that allowed it to become law, specifically so that soldiers fighting for the Union could vote while they were in service, but it wasn't fully expanded until the 1900s. So there you go.
Now we're facing the possibility that won't be counted at all, just because it's a contested election. And I urge anybody who's listening right now to make sure that when you are about to vote, check your registration, check it twice, and make sure that you are in the correct precinct, that you are voting for the correct ballot, that nothing, that you don't, please don't move in between election day and like April now, because we that's the bar now. That is our sliding scale. Anytime between here and now. That all to say, and I'm sorry, I guess what I'm getting at too is that with these military ballots and the ability to throw them out, we are saying F you to our veterans. All the while, we have probably one of the most inept secretaries of defense that I have ever seen, at least in my time in the service. But like just today, it was revealed that he may have yet again sent classified information over Signal. And like, while that in and of itself does not mean that he is an inept Secretary of Defense, it's just everything surrounding that. It's all wrapped up into one big bundle of, we don't care about veterans unless they're voting for us. And even then, just hope and pray we don't cut the VA.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I've heard it stated before that it's a possible target.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
I'm sure Joe would love to get its hands on that. Absolutely love to get its hands on that. But speaking of Doge, this is just kind of an aside that I just realized. I don't think I've heard anything about Elon Musk in the past few days, especially since Wisconsin. I think that says a lot.
He kind of had a meltdown on Fox News the other day. They were asking him how it's going, and he just went silent for like 5 full seconds. And while I don't like to delight in somebody's suffering, this is one of those times where it's like, you deserve this. You deserve this feeling. It is schadenfreude. Like, it is so just gut-wrenching every time you see what he wants to do, and then you connect the dots and you're like, wait a minute, you're not even doing that. He's a con man. He's made a living convincing people, specifically rich people, that he can actually pull off what he says he can pull off. When he doesn't, it doesn't matter. We've all moved on by that point. Doge has consistently been found to not actually be cutting near what they said they were going to be able to cut. What was it? Like he said $3 trillion. $3 trillion in the first year, and they're barely hitting 50 billion right now. I may be wrong about that, but it's like, it's not even close. And
and he's even admitted that might not happen.
And the thing is, like, a good portion of that is cutting jobs. And name me the last time that a successful Republican presidency was built off the basis of cutting jobs, where for the last 30 years they've been saying jobs, jobs, jobs. We have to hold their feet to the fire on this. And I'm not just talking about the Republican Party, but I'm talking about people who should be part of a union, but for some reason vote against that interest. It's like, dude, your job is not as safe as you think it is, especially with the rise of AI, with automation, with the fact that it can just be cut at a moment's notice, with overseas people taking your job, with jobs coming back, and you not having the training or, frankly, the energy to be able to keep up that job. Like, let's say Trump is successful and he's actually able to bring back manufacturing jobs and all these other things. You think these guys who are in their 50s and 60s are going to be able to be on that factory floor working that job?
Probably not.
Well, I can live off my pension. What pension? What 401k? This is
the one that just took a bath the other day?
Yeah, the one that just... Yeah, exactly. Like
toaster bath.
I don't know how to move on from that one. So there was a protest this weekend. I'm just gonna hard pivot. on the 19th of April, there was a 50-51 protest in Raleigh. I went to it. It was a lot of marching, which I haven't marched in a good long time for a protest, so that was a good refresher for me. And it also coincided with the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Lexington and Concord, which was, I guess, I don't know if they planned it that way. Some people said that they did. I think it might have been a happy coincidence. Who knows? I think part of it was because they were concerned that on Easter Sunday or the day after Easter Sunday, Trump was going to try to execute martial law. Like, that was a thing that was floating around there for a while, that he might be trying to go, like, uber fascist. So maybe this stopped it in a way. Who knows? All I can tell you is that there were thousands of people out there. I was a little bit worried that there weren't going to be as many people out there as on the 5th. Nope. There were just as many, if not more people out there as the first time. And once again, we had millions of people all across the states protesting one thing. Even though the signs would tell you different. The signs were all over the place. But everybody was there because we are back to anti-administration party, baby. We're going all the way back to the late 1700s, the early 1800s. You're either administration, pro-administration, or anti-administration.
What's old is new.
What's old is new. We are rewinding the clock 250 years, it seems. But it is to promote, it's to promote this unity that, like, hey, they were even saying at the protest, we've got leftists out here, we've got socialists out here, we've got communists out here, we've got moderate Democrats out here, we've got, he said, we've got anarchists out here. And I heard like 2 people way over go, woo! So, I mean, they do have anarchists out here, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
But it is that shared struggle that, hey, we might not agree on everything, even though a lot of us are on the left, we still share the struggle against this authoritarianism, against this administration and what they're trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it is interesting how we are at kind of the 250th anniversary, like a major event and whatnot. I have found myself, and I don't know if this has been on, I don't think this has been on purpose, just kind of subconsciously kind of going back here in recent days and looking at, old stories from the founding of the country and looking at, things that people were talking about and referencing and whatnot. I think it's interesting going back to, a bunch of like these old like quotes and old, the beginnings of our country, the things that were said and references that we still see today. There's one that's been standing out to me here recently, and it's mainly, I think, because I saw a picture of this. It's a church in Boston. It's the Old North Church. Mm-hmm. And there's a quote from Paul Revere just being displayed, I guess from some sort of projector or whatever. But it says, "Let the warning ride forth once more. Tyranny is at our door." And again, what's old is new. We are in a dangerous time. We really are.
Yeah.
We are in, this is very much kind of, I don't know if a powder keg is the right word for it, or right phrase. Maybe it is.
I think that's a perfect description of what we're currently sitting in.
Yeah, we are very much on the precipice of something, and there is a good chance that if we don't, use our voice, if we don't continue to speak out, if we don't continue to call things out, that we will just fully go forth into a tyranny. If we don't hold people accountable, well then, we did not keep our democracy.
Sorry, Ben.
Yeah.
When the president is able to hold people in an El Salvadoran prison with impunity after the Supreme Court, the highest court of law in the land, says that you must bring somebody back, and then Congress is unwilling to do anything to stop the president, even when it is illegal, we are at a crisis. This is not sugarcoating it. Like, this is what the founding fathers were talking about when they wrote in the Federalist Papers why it was so important to have a separation of power, why it was so important to establish 3 separate but co-equal branches of government. And we have on our hands right now a guy who was voted into office on a populist platform that is currently doing everything in his power to A, enrich himself, B, enrich his friends, and C, completely avoid any consequences, both legal and societal. Like, we do not have many options left. If the courts fail, if the police won't help us, if Congress won't help us, where do we go from here? And I'm not pulling that thread anymore. Many people online have already said how they feel what the next step is. I don't even have to say it. If you're listening, you already know what I'm talking about.
I will say one thing that is very much worrying me is, I think we may have mentioned this in a previous episode, or maybe this was just a conversation you and I were having. But one thing that the Republican Party is doing, or at least, not the Republican Party, but people in Trump's orbit, people who obviously speak for the administration, if not in an official capacity, then at least in a social, cultural capacity. Mm-hmm. They're saying stuff, they're trying to lay the groundwork for like a third term, which is, again, unconstitutional. But one thing that I saw the other day that is actually kind of fucking chilling is Trump has a counterterrorism czar, a guy by the name of Sebastian Gorka, who is about as far right as you can get and is absolutely batshit insane, right? Mm-hmm. But he kind of take this back to what we were saying a little bit earlier about Kilmar Prego Garcia. Obviously what's going on with Garcia is fucked up, and it is un-American and unconstitutional. Everyone in this country, and this isn't me saying this as a Democrat and what I believe should happen. This is literally saying what the fucking Constitution says. Literally everyone who is in this country, citizen or not, in the process of becoming a citizen, whatever, everyone who is in these borders has the right to due process, right? That's just a fact. That's how it is, right? Sebastian Gorka, again, Trump's counterterrorism czar, said the other day that people who support Kilmar Brego Garcia and who say that he deserves due process, that really anyone who is being illegally, unjustly, unconstitutionally sent to this fucking concentration camp, because that's what CCOP fucking is. Anyone who is speaking out against these people being sent there could be charged or should be charged with aiding and abetting and should be considered terrorists themselves. So literally, if you are someone who has a problem with someone like Trump wiping his ass with the Constitution and messing with the idea of due process, then you, my friend, in the eyes of Sebastian Gorka, are a fucking terrorist.
Right.
That is terrifying because, again, this may not be Trump himself saying it, but this is a guy who obviously is a mouthpiece of some kind for the administration.
And this is what I've talked about before. Like, going after Trump does nothing anymore. Trump at this point should just be thought of as a figurehead rhetorically, because going after him does nothing. It actually strengthens his popularity. You take off the cogs, because if the cogs don't work, the clock doesn't run, right? It's stop attacking him, start attacking the people who are making these insane claims and asking for them to be A, removed, B, completely ostracized from society. We do not have room for this kind of rhetoric where people are able to say, if you believe a certain thing, just believe. Not even like if you act upon something. Just if you believe whatever the administration doesn't want you to believe, you are a terrorist. I mean, this is not to fall into the trap of the right, but this is kind of getting into 1984 territory, where if the party doesn't want you to speak on something, you can be disappeared, you can be black bagged and sent to El Salvador now. Like, what? Because Trump is on camera talking about how we're going after homegrowns next. And if homegrowns means anybody who's born in this country, and if terrorist means anybody who disagrees with the administration, that means you. That means you, the person listening to this right now, you are potentially in the crosshairs. That's not an exaggeration. That's not
you and me. That's
not like pulling a thread that isn't there. That's what they said from their own mouths. If you don't think...
Us in the fucking crosshairs.
And if you don't think that this is something that's not possible, I mean, not to rehash things that I see on Blue Sky, but read the poem. You know the one I'm talking about. First they came for the the thing. In the words of our former President Joe Biden, you know the thing. We are at that point where if you're not speaking up for these people, you are next. Maybe not next time, But down the line, you are. Anybody who's not part of the in group will be part of the X group. This is how fascism works. It is a process. It starts slow and it moves really, really fast at the end and burns itself out. But there's a lot of death and destruction in its wake. And we cannot let it happen at all. We cannot let this experiment play out because it will be devastation. And it probably would be the end of our country as we know it. Because it certainly was for Germany.
I think no matter what happens, we managed to get through this and still have a country. Or if we still have a democracy, a democratic country, there will be scars from this for decades, if not centuries to come. We will be dealing with these effects on a national level, on a local level, and on a global level.
Yeah, if not just from the misinformation, but from the policies that they're setting forward now, absolutely. That to say, we do need to end this on a somewhat lighter note. I feel like we've been very dour the last few episodes right at the end. I don't always want to end it that way.
Let me ask you this. It's just a fun little thing. How about that?
Sure.
Unless you have something specific.
No.
Let me ask you this. Who is your favorite fictional president? It could be TV, movies, books, whatever.
Fictional president.
Yes.
You know what? The president from Independence Day.
Yes.
Because you know what? What more can you ask of a president when dealing with aliens?
He's got to get in the jet and blow them up.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's got to get in that jet, man. He's got to. I don't know. I love kitschy movies too. I really enjoyed Air Force One as like a Rambo style, like this is so unrealistic, and it's really funny when I start enjoying the parts with like his cabinet more than the action scenes where I'm just like, oh crap, they're trying to like coup him right now. Basically, they're trying to like take power away from him. They don't even know if he's dead, or they don't know what happened to him up on the plane. This is actually interesting. And then it cuts right back to the action. I'm just like, oh, I guess we'll have to resolve that like 15 minutes from now.
Oh gosh,
I was interested in that. Why'd you cut away?
I'm not gonna lie. I recently rewatched The Phantom Menace.
Oh,
and they were talking about like all the trade stuff. I'm like, ooh, actually. This is kind of interesting to listen to.
Oh my God, George Lucas was a genius. Turns out I did want to watch politics in my Star Wars.
I guess so for me, at least. And this is about to be the most typical bullshit.
No, just say it. Don't you
answer.
You
and
can't.
It is President Bartlett from the West Wing.
I knew you were going to say. You were going to say Bartlett. What did Bartlett even do? What did he do for the country?
Look, it's not necessarily what he did for the country. Nah. So I mean, I think for me, and I mean, I watched the whole show through. God, I don't even know how many times.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like watching it the first couple times. And we're like, oh yeah, I kind of like this guy. Cool. Blah blah blah. But watching it now, I'm just like, oh good God, if we could only have like a fraction of that.
Yeah.
Of, like,
unfortunately,
decency.
It's fiction.
Very much so.
And one thing that I try to watch The West Wing, and I don't think I can get over its like pre 9/11, post Bill Clinton 90s optimism. I don't think I can do it. Like I need a little bit of cynicism in my political shows.
And that is fair. That's completely fair. I will say it is very much like Aaron Sorkin, like just really went in on the saccharine kind of element of things. Like it is, like you said, very optimistic, too optimistic at times.
Yeah.
But honestly, sometimes, especially with everything going on, that's just what you fucking need.
No, I'm
as a break.
I'm definitely not knocking anybody who enjoys it. It's just for me, I'm kind of like I just feel like this would never happen. Like when they're
so that's why your favorite fictional president is actually Frank Underwood from House of Cards.
I like Frank Underwood in the way that I like Andrew Jackson, where he's such a piece of shit that it's kind of fun to watch. But then you're like, ooh, actually no, he's like a really bad guy. But like I can't look away. It's like a car crash. But okay, actual real answer, because I stalled for myself for a moment to think about it, but my real answer is, and I can't remember his name right now, but the president from Designated Survivor, who's played by Kiefer Sutherland.
Tom Kirkman.
Kirkman, yeah. I was like, because he's not a Democrat, he's not a Republican. He's very, in its own way, it's a little bit optimistic. Spoilers for the TV show, but he wins re-election against all odds. And like, that's about as optimistic as that show gets. But it's a fun show, you know. He's basically just a smart-ish guy that slowly learns how to become sort of ruthless as a president, but also not too ruthless. Like, it's really the balance of power. I like that. I like the way that they displayed that. Like, he's not perfect. And I think that bringing it down to earth, but not letting it settle too hard, is the right amount of realism that I like in a TV show. But that's a good question. I like that question to end it off.
Yeah, just something to kind of lighten the mood a little bit there.
Yeah, something for all of you to watch in between these episodes of Left of Old North. In the meantime, if you want to check out our old episodes, we are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, looking at a couple other places to try to get onto, like Tidal was one that was floated to me, but I don't know how to get our stuff on there. So, and you can also check us out we're on YouTube, and follow us on Blue Sky, Twitter, Facebook, all the good places and not so good places. And if you want to throw us a bone, we have a Patreon. You can also buy us a coffee, and we post these episodes. We're trying to do it every week on Monday, and if you want to listen in, just make sure to either subscribe or check back in with us then. But until next time, we'll see you on the Left of Old North.